Hello everyone, today we are going to be discussing the volcano eruption of Mount Pinatubo. This was the second largest volcano eruption of the 20th century. The actual eruption itself occurred on June 15th, 1991. We will explore the socioeconomic implications that proceeded after the eruption, whereby displacement and disruption acted as huge factors affecting the population of the Philippines at the time. Dr. Newhall and Dr. Punong Bayon created a joint team to study the volcano months leading up to the actual eruption itself. They implemented evacuation plans that went to schools and local community buildings. However, they completely skipped over people living in poverty-stricken areas. These areas were subsequently the ones that were affected the most by the eruption itself. The American and Filipino relations during this time period was very important to understanding the natural disaster itself. This was very controversial because the Filipinos put trust in the Americans based on their previous experience and better technology that they had access to. However, they thought more could have been done to save more people. The Clark Air Base was very important. It was the largest American air base that was overseas. This was a symbol of the American-Filipino relations. However, it also is a reminder of a huge disappointment towards the Filipino community. At least 17 commercial jets flew through the drifting ash cloud, which sustained about $100 million in damage. Every bridge within 18 miles was also completely destroyed, and towns flooded while others were fully buried in mud. The recovery plan that the Americans decided to implement towards Mount Pinatubo's relief operations focused on 6 different things: resettlement, the livelihood, social services, infrastructure, technology and science, and land use and environmental management. It's important to pay particular attention to the Aida, who were an indigenous population within the Philippines at the time. 10% of them refused to leave their homelands. They were scared of abandoning their crops. There was a major disruption of daily life. 800 square kilometers of rice-growing farmland were destroyed. 800,000 head of livestock and poultry were killed. All preventative measures were also destroyed. Watchtowers, seismology equipment, and outside posts did not survive. As previously stated, people living in poverty were the ones who were affected the most. Many could not afford to go back to their previous provinces, leaving a large portion of people displaced. Education was completely disrupted as it was canceled for the rest of the term, and many children were orphaned. This all contributing to the large homelessness problem within the Philippines. Months following the eruption, more unfortunate events happened. There were higher death rates due to a spread of disease because of the close proximity of people in relief centers. Many of these diseases were waterborne diseases, and many could not get help because healthcare facilities were completely ruined. Around this time, there was a lot of pressure from the West by the Filipino government. They placed a lot of trust in the Americans' hands. Ultimately, the Filipino government was very disappointed by the results of how relief operations were handled. The Filipino government refused to give back the Clark Air Base. The scientists developed an alert system and distributed it to civil defense and local officials as a simple means to communication. This was part of the preparation process done by the scientists at the time. However, although there was months of preparation, no amount of preparation could suffice being fully prepared for a natural disaster. At the time, there were multiple tsunamis and earthquakes that hit in and around the same time as the volcano erupted. This brings in the factor of chaos. The plans implemented were now failing, and people ran towards bus shelters and bridges. However, shelters would collapse from overcrowding, and bridges would be destroyed due to many people running on them and overcrowding them as well, which contributed to many of the deaths. There was a lot of criticisms on the handlings of the project. One was that the first to evacuate were the Americans that were in the airbase. That meant 15,000 military and service workers that could have potentially helped were gone. Second were the locals, which were the IATA, and they felt that that was a violation of their rights because they were forcibly moved. Some of the scientists also even left before local residents. The location was 25 miles away at a naval station, and many could not reach that point. People really wanted improvements on government management. A lot of academics look back on Mount Pinatubo and conclude that more transparency was definitely needed. There was a lot of pressure on Americans and the scientists. However, they themselves could not predict the velocity of the actual volcano eruption itself. Although there was a disruption on daily life, it was brought back by community efforts. While the actual eruption was happening, many were seen to be helping one another out. It was shown that there were a lot of makeshift bridges that were built by people trying to escape, and many would stay until everyone got over the bridge successfully. Mount Pinatubo is an example on different ways on how to handle a response. This displays that manpower was actually more useful and beneficial than money. President Aquino provided millions in pesos of relief, yet manpower was really what was needed. The National Disaster Coordinating Council mobilized civilian and military resources to respond to the rescue and relief requirements of the affected population. It saw that all surviving hospitals, schools, and other standing public buildings that were occupied by the government would become relief centers. Manpower would have been very beneficial in rescuing people because building structures in the Philippines at the time failed. But there was nothing that they could do to prevent that because this was a huge eruption. A lack of knowledge or resources for many residents did not put them at a disadvantage in comparison to foreigners in the area at the time. Mount Pinatubo was an important part of Filipino history. It destroyed the lives of an up-and-coming, thriving country. It proved that no matter what your economic standing was, the natural disaster could overpower anything, and no amount of preparation can actually prepare one for a natural disaster to occur.